You guys got ornaments going up and Christmas tree and
Everything's done.
lights.
Everything's done.
Really?
Yeah, we got the lights outside completely done. We've got Christmas tree in the living room. Kids set up their little Christmas tree in the dining room.
Do they do anything upstairs in that game room?
No. One year we had them do, or I think it was last year we had them do it upstairs, but they wanted it downstairs. So we ended up moving it downstairs last year.
Yeah.
And they put it in my office last year, and I was not having that this year, so I put it in the dining room instead.
How are you supposed to work with a Christmas tree and all kinds
Well, it's like I'm in the corner where there's Christmas trees in my office. I'm like in the corner of my own office trying to work around it. And then I set up Christmas Village,
which is a big deal for you guys.
Well, I skipped it last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I skipped it last year because I had too much going on. I had that master's program that I was finishing up.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, I was sick with that kidney infection.
Oh, yeah.
So I had all this
where you almost died.
where I had all that makeup work to do, and it all had to be done on like December 7th or 8th or something like that.
I don't know if you guys know this, but this guy right here, last year, gosh, in September, we were in Las Vegas at the Realtor.com Summit. He almost died from a kidney infection. He almost died.
Well, it went undiagnosed because I thought it was the flu or something.
Yeah, and the thing is that he actually almost ended up dying. And so we were talking about Christmas this year and how different it is because he's alive versus being on his deathbed and with, needles in him. So anyway, welcome to today's live club session. I'm Gary Kreth.
I'm Chris Scott. We're the Paperless agent here. And today we've got very, very exciting thing we're going to work through today, which is kicking off the 14-day goal-setting challenge.
Yep.
And I've put together a resource, a workbook for everybody. And I'm going to share that with you in just a couple of moments. I want to talk you through the 14 days of this, and we'll get into it after just a couple of announcements.
I had a question for everybody here. Did anybody learn about this 14-day challenge that we're doing via Facebook Live in the grouping club?
A Groupon club?
In the Facebook group. I'm just really curious if anybody here saw that Facebook Live that we did. What was it?
I don't know. It was like 2 days ago.
2 days ago.
But get this. So have you guys ever had the experience of setting a goal or setting a business objective? And for the purpose of our conversation today, I want to narrow it around our business goals, okay? I know there's lots of personal goals and stuff like that we all have, but I want to narrow the context around this conversation and what we're going to share with you guys on this 14-day goal-setting challenge to be about your business goals. But I do have a question for you. Have you ever set a business goal and failed to meet it? Or have you ever set a business goal and really failed to make any progress on it whatsoever? I mean, I think one of the observations that I've seen is, here's a common one. How many homes, we're talking to someone on our team. How many homes do you want to sell? I want to sell 100 homes this year.
That's awesome.
Check in a year later. How many homes do you sell?
20.
20, same as I did the year before.
These things happen. But the thing is that this is a very real circumstance that we have in real estate, is that we go after very lofty goals because we're ambitious people. Why in the world would we be selling real estate in one of the most difficult professions in the world if we weren't ambitious?
Yeah.
But the thing is, we set our goals and then we're like, I'm just going to hustle after it.
I think it's a very common experience. And guys, I mean, let me read the yes, failed all around. I mean, here's the thing. It's common. And here is one of the reasons why. And we're going to get into this. I'm very excited to share this workbook that we put together in these 14 days, because it's not just what I've learned or what Gary's learned. This is like a culmination of, several decades plus borrowing from some of the masters too, right?
Yeah.
Like we've borrowed
outside of the real estate industry.
Outside of real estate, right? So we've borrowed from people like Peter Drucker, right? We've borrowed from people like Dale Carnegie. So like we've borrowed from some of the masters. We've incorporated this into these 14 days. But one of the reasons why we fail in goal setting, in achieving these goals, particularly business goals, is they're the wrong goals to start with, right? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't set a sales goal, for example. It's just when we go out and set that goal, it's the wrong goal. We haven't substantiated it. We don't know what's really necessary to achieve that goal.
And it might not be tied to anything else.
Right. We might have conflicting priorities that are like just thwarting our ability to pursue that goal.
Yep.
We might not have enough accountability and support to get that goal done. There's all of these influences that make it to where we don't achieve them. And here's usually like what happens also is when we don't achieve a goal, it's not like the world ends.
Right.
We usually just resign ourselves. We have a resignation of, oh well, maybe next year. Okay, so
right. So basically, the consequences are not dire enough for us to say,
right.
"Oh no, I have got to hit this goal."
Right, and sometimes we have to manufacture consequences. To be honest with you, and they can't. And when I say manufacture, they can't be false. They can't be flippant consequences. Like, oh well, if I don't achieve this goal,
I'm not going to Japan for the summer.
Yeah, I mean, or I'm going to punish myself. I don't know. Like, they have to be real consequences, and there are ways to manufacture them. So what we've designed is a 14-day process. It's actually 14 steps, and we're going to address each one on each day. And what it is designed to do is to just simply throw you into a different way of thinking. Now, a big part of it is you're going to spend not 15 minutes thinking about a goal, or one day thinking about a goal. We're going to spend weeks thinking about a goal. Now, that's one of the problems. We don't think through critically enough about what we want to pursue and why we want to pursue it and how we're going to pursue it and how we're going to plan to accomplish that. One of the problems is we do it kind of flippantly. I don't know. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in a seminar and wrote down goals,
right,
and then said, all right, I'm going to go get this done. And then a year later,
that's the last time you look at it until the next year, right?
And it's because I spent a whole 15 minutes thinking about it. It was only based on what I want, what my mind said I wanted right now, or what I needed right now. It was not based on what reality.
Yeah, and there has to be some significant reflection done around what this goal is, what it's going to produce for you, what the outcome will produce for you, what the consequences are, should you achieve it or not achieve it. There's a lot that goes into it. And with that, Chris is going to share.
I'm not going to share my screen.
Oh no.
No. What I'm going to do, I want you guys to be able to download this workbook.
Okay, so I'm going
to put a link in here for you guys to download the workbook right now. Now,
if you haven't done so already.
I don't think they have, because
a lot of people found it in the Facebook group.
I just put it in the private Facebook group right before this session.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to put a link to the private Facebook group right now. How do I do it? There we go.
Is that it right there?
There it is.
Sarah just did it.
Sarah did it. I'll do it again. And what will happen, guys, when you click on that link, let me just show you exactly where it is. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I can't. It's still looking at us. All right. I want you guys to download that. There's two versions. There's a Mac version, and then there's a PC version. And
if you're not using Mac or PC, then you're an alien, and I don't know where you come from.
They could be using. There is a computer called the Alien, but I think it uses the PC platform.
That's my point.
So download that, because we're going to talk about it. I'm going to share my screen because I do have just a few announcements that we're going to make, and then we're going to talk through the 14 different steps and the 14 different days associated with this goal-setting challenge. So I'm excited about that.
I have to read something as you're sharing your screen. Yes. Linda said, the first time ever I did hit my goal this year because I had no choice. Boy, that's an incentive right there.
Right.
I had to buy out equity in the house due to a divorce or move. I did not want to move. Learn that if my goal had a failure is not an option addendum, then I got it done. Well, we're going to talk about things like that.
We're going to dive exactly into creating that. It's funny how we end up pursuing what we need, not necessarily what we want. And we achieve what we need, not necessarily what we want. And so what we really have to look at when we set goals in terms of what we want, we have to make sure they're somehow connected to what we need, right? And that's part of that process that we're going to get into. But let me share my screen. I'm here talking, and I have a few announcements, short announcements to make. Meanwhile, please download that resource, start to scan through it, and we'll be well on our way. So let me go ahead. Got my screen shared. The first thing that I wanted to do is just to show you exactly where in the private Facebook group that those files are located. So hide that, zoom in here. So in the Paperless Agent private Facebook group, if you're not a member, request to join, and Sarah here on our team is monitoring that to make sure that you guys get access to it. You'll notice there's this little files section under the navigation on the left-hand side, and you'll see the 14-day goal setting challenge workbook in Microsoft version, and then again here in the Mac version. So go ahead, you can just click on it, download it, and you'll be ready for today's session. Alrighty then. The first announcement that I had is about the digital marketing campaign for the month. I just wanted to share that with everybody. Sarah, can you drop the link for actually I could do it. I'm sitting right here.
Time out, everybody. If you need the PC version of the workbook, click on the announcements tab on the left side menu of the Facebook page, and it will be there.
It's also right here. So you have to go to the files section.
Okay.
So if you go to the private Facebook group, you may or may not see it. There's this files thing over here. Click on that. You'll see the one that says MS, that's PC, and Mac is for Mac. So download the appropriate one for you guys. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this month's MVP with everybody. I'm going to drop the link in there for you. And that's the digital marketing campaign that we provide you with. I'm just going to really quickly highlight on the theme, which is 9 ways to share the spirit of the season starting from home. So it's still home related, but we've just connected it to the spirit of the season. And so you can see the PDF there. Of course, you're getting the blog post and all the other resources. Just click on that link that I shared with you to be able to download it. The only thing I wanted to share with everybody is there is when you download it, if you're using the cover letter and if you're using the script that we provide you with, please read through it and pay special attention to the call to actions within the cover letter and in the script. We did a slight deviation from what we've normally done. I think it's an improvement, but please read through it, and it'll make sense when you get there. Okay, I have another announcement here very quickly before we get into the 14-day goal setting challenge. And I have a special offer for help getting started with Paperless agent services and stuff like that. So we've partnered with Jim Pruitt, who is a member who also provides consulting services. And so Jim worked to put together a package for the Paperless Agent Quick Start Consultation. And what he does is he will literally help you get up and running using all of the great stuff. In fact, in many cases, some of it will be done for you. So what he will do is do a quick start consultation. It's $265. It's going to get you help getting started with all the things that we do. So this is where we're getting into doing it for, helping you really getting into the implementation. So he'll help you with the bio template for marketing impact. He'll review your bio that you have. He'll bio domain for your site, set up and update a Facebook business page. He'll export contacts for your file. I mean, he's going to do all this stuff for you.
That's really awesome.
Set up your agent ID site. They're going to work through your posting on your marketing calendar. And then he's got all this other great stuff. Now, if you're interested in working with Jim, just to use more of what we provide you with you, all you have to do is email Jim. And I'm going to drop Jim's email address in the chat section here for everybody. And you'll be able to email Jim, and he'll tell you exactly how to get up and running with that. So if one of your goals, for example, is to be able to utilize more of the services because you want to attract more business and you want to use the tools that we've already provided you with, that quick start consultation with Jim Pruitt will help you get up and running.
Yep. So like Chris said, we just dropped that email into the chat section. If you want to save that, email him. Make sure you get in touch with him quickly because I would imagine that after this, he's probably going to have quite a bit of requests to help folks out.
Well, for $265 to have all this stuff done for you, that's a really good deal.
Yeah, no. When he just showed me that price, I'm like, I think I should have him. Oh wait, I already did that. I did all that stuff.
Well, we work together. He's got a few other packages as well for people who want like full service branding work done. But he put that package together because he wanted more people to be able to put the stuff that they have to work for them. And so much of it is just like the initial getting it done in the beginning, right? You set up your agent ID site properly and have it done well, and it's good. And you get your first MVP or digital marketing campaign out and running, and it's like setting that pattern of momentum. So with that, those are the announcements that we have. And now let's move on to the 14-day goal setting challenge.
Awesome.
And what we've done is we've put together this workbook.
Chris, a lot of people are having trouble downloading any sort of version of that workbook.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's not.
And like even folks like like Derek Radford.
Mhm.
Derek's not able to download it. He said it's not allowing him to view the file. Um,
All right.
Jim is unable to locate it.
All right. Let me do this, guys.
Yeah.
Let me see. Do we want to provide the file? Here's what I can do.
We can actually, can we upload it to WebGem and have them download it direct from here?
Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kick me off the screen for a second. I'm going to get the file to Sarah.
Okay.
She's going to work on getting it somewhere where they can download it and then post the link in the group. So just sit tight. I'm going to have Sarah. What we're going to do is I'm going to walk through this document, so you'll have a sense of what is in there. Meanwhile, in the background,
a lot of people have no problems.
I don't know. Well, you know what? Sometimes it's probably,
go to the files tab. Just go to the files tab.
I actually had a hard time uploading it to Facebook for some reason. It took me like 5 times to upload it. But don't worry, because I've got Sarah on the case. She's gonna upload it to somewhere else other than Facebook, so that we can provide you guys with a link. It is a zip file. By the way, oh no, it's not a zip file. Never mind.
Maybe upload it to Google Drive and then just share them.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the.
Yeah, probably. Okay.
All right. So
we'll get that taken care of for everybody who was not able to access it. And
so meanwhile, why don't you entertain everybody with something that you have,
with some holiday dancing and some spirits.
Well, you know what? You've been working on goal setting with some folks, and some of the folks that you work with.
I have, yeah. So I do a little bit of one-on-one consulting with a few long-term clients. And one thing that we've been doing is exactly what we're talking about today, and that is really setting up 2019 right now, but not setting it up to where 2019 is locked in place. That's one thing that Chris and I were talking about, is that it's really important for us to be able to, number one, reflect on what happened in 2018 without judgment. So that's a big thing, Chris, for me, is every time that we're setting goals, is that you have to reflect on what happened this year, what your goals were this year, what you did this year, what you accomplished this year, what your gaps were, but you have to do it without judgment. Because if you do it judging yourself, then you're going to really set yourself up for failure for 2019.
Well, I think objective critique is very, it's hard to do. First off, being objective is a hard thing to do, right? Like I think, but through reflection and a little bit of time, it's definitely possible, particularly if you can look at stuff. I know one of the things that you do is you have everyone pull numbers out, which we're going to have you do through this 14-day goal setting challenge. So what I'm going to do is, thank you, Gary, for filling a little bit of that space while we get that file uploaded. Sarah's working on it right now. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start showing this to you guys. Now, this is a lengthy workbook.
By the way, we have it in Microsoft Word and in Pages.
So don't worry.
So that we didn't want you to do it in PDF. And the reason we did that is we want you to be able to type your answers in there as well.
Yeah, so this is truly a workbook. It's in the, you can open it in Word or Pages so that you can type your answers and stuff like that right into it. By the way, don't worry, because even though we're going to go through all 14 days today you can really only get done day 1, right? Because it's 14 days. So when you go through this, there's a little short message from us, but I'm just going to zoom in. I don't need to zoom it in totally into so you guys can read it, because you'll have access to it. But the first day starts with asking yourself what happened last year. And that's exactly what you were talking about, thinking and reflecting without judgment.
Without judgment, that's a big thing.
On what happened.
Right.
And what I find is that, and I do, you know what? I keep a journal for this. And so I don't keep a journal for this purpose. I keep a journal because I keep a journal. But one of the ways I utilize my journal is be able to do my annual reflection. So I will go back, and it's amazing how many things I have forgotten that were good, that were bad, that were lessons learned. But it is really important to do so. Now, most of us probably don't have a journal. It's something that I've worked on years just to get to the point where I did it consistently enough. But here's what I will say. You probably have some form of calendar that you use, either digital or paper. Bust out your calendar and then start to ask yourself these questions. Things like, what Did I achieve? You know, what is funny, when I ask people what they achieve or where they made mistakes or lessons learned, people tend to dwell on the bad things, not the good things.
They do. Why do we do that as humans? It's like we can't remember all of the successes that we had. Instead, we go immediately to the negative.
Right. Well, I do believe the negative is extremely profitable if we accept it as correction and not view it as failure.
Right. I think that's the whole thing, is that where were the gaps? Reflect on that and say, wow, it's like that wonderful book called Failing Forward. I read that in 2000. But Failing Forward talked all about how when you are testing different things out, how when you fail, well, keep moving forward, because all that is it's a lesson to learn. It's not failure and shut it down.
Well, that feat, like when you look at those setbacks, they are learning opportunities if you embrace them. You know, and I try to do that as often, as frustrating as it may be. I try to view every single setback and say, what happened? Now, sometimes you need a little time and space from the time you experience the setback so you can remove the emotion of the setback so you can look at what you learned from the setback. You know what I mean? So that's day one, is asking yourself what happened, and you're thinking, you're analyzing, you're assessing. You're doing this long before you start thinking about what you want to achieve, because you really got to ask yourself, what the heck happened last year? You know what I mean? Like, seriously, what happened last year? So if you keep a journal, great, review that. Or if you know, like maybe you don't even maintain a calendar. I think a calendar is very helpful, but pull up your calendar and just start, even if you don't have stuff in the calendar, just look at the months of the calendar and ask yourself, like, hey, what were some of the biggest achievements and successes? What were you going through? Right? Like what was going on in life during that time? You know, that's a big thing that we're going to address later on one of the days, which is conflicts. You know, goal conflicts or priority conflicts are when I have a goal to do something and then life happens that I have to deal with.
Yep.
Right.
So what are the options?
Well, sometimes you have to make an adjustment. Other times you can make it up. I'll give you an example. Well, you mentioned earlier on how I had that kidney infection last year. Literally laid me out for a month. Well, I had stuff that I wanted to do. I was actually in the final stages of completing my master's degree in education. I was literally in the final semester.
And what happened? Life
happened. I got a kidney infection and I got taken out for a whole month. I had to take a withdrawal from the class. And I mean, like, eventually so you want to know what ended up happening as a result? After, like, I was no longer on medication and I was able to think clearly, and my kidney, like, my body wasn't hurting anymore. I emailed the instructor and, like, well, you're going to have to withdraw from the class. Here's what you're going to have to do if you want to graduate in December. This is like October, right? So if you want to graduate in December, you have to complete at least 60% of the coursework by, I forget what day it was, and then the remainder by December 8th. You know what I did? I got it done.
You got it done.
I got it done. Because life does happen. Sometimes you just have to adjust your plan. Exactly. What did I have to do? I had to adjust my plans.
You had to adjust everything else that you were going to plan on doing during that timeline.
So you want to look at that. Look at the setbacks and obstacles that you encountered. And then think about, and this is a big one, closing out, what lessons did you learn? You learn from your achievements, but you probably learn more from your setbacks. Think about what the lessons that are hidden there, because you can profit from them greatly. Now, that's just day one. And probably don't start that one today. Begin it today, but finish it tomorrow, right? Give yourself some time. Right? Don't just jump into it and like, because you will cheat yourself of the benefit of this experience. Now, here's the next thing you want to do. This is looking similarly to what we were doing, but this is where we're going to get more specific about our criteria, particularly around our real estate business and business activities.
Yeah, so this is where we're actually going to dive in. This is where you need to have been tracking your numbers the entire year. And if you have not been tracking your numbers month after month after month, this is a great time to go back and gather that information. You may actually need to sit down with your broker and get some help tracking this.
Yeah, so to your best of ability, answer these questions. Now, you probably knew how many sides you closed in the last year, right? You can count that one up.
I hope so.
Probably, right? Yeah. And you can run the math and figure out what that volume was, and hopefully you know how much money that you made, right? Gross commission wise. But then if you can drill down a little bit further, and this is what Gary's talking about, is when did those deals close?
Yeah, so this is really important to track. Is you're tracking several different things. Number one, you're tracking the seasonality of your transactions. So if, let's just pretend, if every single month this past year you sent out the MVP and you made your phone calls and you had your Facebook ads going out and everything was done like clockwork, well, then what you can do is you can actually track your sales as a part of seasonality. However, what happens? Life. And
inconsistency.
And inconsistency. So we may not be sending out the MVP every single month. We may not be doing our Facebook ads. We may not be making our phone calls. And so what you need to do is track your transactions throughout the year and see and reflect what was going on during those months, like 2 to 3 months before you had a big blowout. So if you had huge sales in August, well, you don't need to know what you were doing in August because that's not what produced those results. What produced those results was 90 days beforehand. So what was happening in March and April and May that produced those results in August? So it's good to reflect on that, get everything down in each month, be able to calendarize everything, all of your marketing materials, and say, gosh, what was I doing every month to market myself? And does that correspond with all of my sales? What will happen is over time is as consistency and your omnipresent marketing really comes in and is consistently executed year after year, you will be able to track your seasonality. And this will happen every single year. And so what you'll be able to do is determine what percentage of your transactions happen during each month.
Well, I think it's tremendously helpful to look at that from a month-to-month standpoint. Because if you couple that with the step in day one, which is to ask yourself, what happened?
Right.
Then all of a sudden, you are beginning to equip yourself with the knowledge of what your ability, what your capability, and I don't mean like skill-wise, but just what, your bandwidth-wise, what can I handle? Where am I going to need to get help? Where can I amplify my efforts, right? So that's tremendously useful. You also look at like ratio of buyers to sellers. Very important if you have designs on developing as a listing expert, right? Is to track that number. And the last one is where the business come from. This is going to be probably the hardest one for you guys.
Chris, when I got into real estate 21 years ago, so easy to track the source of a client. So easy. It was like either came from a newsletter, from a postcard, from a sign call, or a referral. And that was pretty much it. Or maybe a newspaper ad. But that really didn't happen.
Well, here's what I'm going to give you a tip. Because if you haven't been tracking where they came from, you're not going to know, and that's okay. But what I will ask you to do is to use the 80-20 rule, which is roughly, the 80-20 rule. That's what Pareto's principle. Pareto's principle. Yeah. And roughly, 80% of your business is coming from 20% of your effort. And if you were to look in there and say, well, where did the business really come from? And I don't mean tracking last click or last thing done. Like you might say, well, this person came from an email, but that was from your database of contacts that you had. So that's really coming from your network or from a referral, right? Or you might look at it and say, well, I think this one came from a particular online lead source. Great. That one is probably more simple to understand. So what you want to do to your best of ability is say, where am I getting this stuff from? And start to just earmark like a little number, like, well, I think this is probably half my business. Now, on average, from our own surveys and from our own experience, 80% of the business is coming from either repeat clients or referred clients or word of mouth clients. And all of that is why we implement the MVP, is to be able to capitalize on that. So for so many of us, if we just spent a little bit more time implementing things like the MVP and omnipresent marketing to the people who already know us, well, we're going to see a dramatic increase in the results that we get.
Right.
But
so hold on real quick. I'm going to answer some multiple questions that are all the same. Basically, what if I'm brand new and I don't have historical data? If you don't have historical data, you will need to skip day 2 because you don't have anything to compare to yet.
Right.
If you are in the same office or in the same market as somebody else who is here in the Paperless Agent Club, and they're brand new as well, you can get together. Or what I've always done, by the way, is I always went to a producer who was producing at a level where I wanted to be, and I would ask them questions.
What I would suggest here is you're looking for a benchmark. Okay. So if you're brand new, you really here's what you want to have. You want to get an understanding on what is a good year for a new agent. What is a good year, right? What's the average year and what's a good year? That's important to know, because as we start to set goals, you don't want to set something completely unrealistic getting into the business, but you also don't want to just do what everybody else does. So you can work with, I mean, you're going to need to work with someone with experience there to say, hey, you know, a good first year in the business, what am I looking at?
By the way, this is going to be different from market to market.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, if
Totally.
you're here in Austin and I'm sitting there coaching you on what your good first year is, a good first year in Austin is closing about 4 million in production.
Yeah,
that's a really good first year. An exceptional first year is going to be closing 6 to 8 million, but a mediocre year is going to be 1 to 2 million. Yeah. So you know, it's all completely relevant.
It also has a lot to do with how much startup capital you have if you're just getting into the business, right?
That's very true.
You know, if you've got fallback and you've got a long runway there, you can invest more heavily to be able to get a higher result, right? So I think those are things where you need a little bit of experience to be able to say, in your situation, in our market, given your resources, here's what I would expect. And work with your broker, or if you have a trainer or a manager in your office, ask them what they've seen, what's average and what's good. And you're going to want to have those numbers because they are going to be part of your goal setting process. So now that we've looked at, you know, day 2 was looking at prior years performance. Day 3,
DW said, is it better to look at the dollar amount or the number of closings?
Both.
You need to look at both.
Yeah, because you're gonna also look at average sales price, right?
Yeah, because what the correlation is as Chris said, is the average sales price, and if that average sales price is too low for you, it's good to know that going into the next year, so you can set your goal to increase your average sales price.
Right.
So
yeah. And by the way, and this is a thoughtful, when I mean thoughtful, meaning you're putting thought into this. So don't just take a page swipe from what I'm saying, set these goals. You're going to want to develop yours, because you may do the math and be like, my average sales price. If I keep doing more of what I'm doing at the current average sales price, I'm going to have to work like 100 hours a week. And that's just not realistic.
Exactly.
Right? So you might have to look and start to modify the goals around your situation. But that's why this process is so important, because it allows you, it gives you the space and the breathing room and the reflection to do that. And so in day 3, what we do is ask ourselves, what do we want to achieve? Now, let me preface this by saying that this is a preliminary goal setting. This is more like intention setting. We're not anywhere close to being done.
Oh, and gosh, you have to review this every single quarter. This is not something that you set it, and at the end of next year, you look back and go, well, crap, I didn't hit my numbers.
Well, and you're not even because all we're doing at this point is setting an intention. That intention has not been vetted. It has not been validated. Has not been substantiated. Has no plan associated with it, right? So all we're going to do on day 3 is to say and ask ourselves, what would I like to achieve? What do I think I want to achieve is probably the best way to say that. So you'll go through and answer the questions. Please read through this, because there's a lot of instruction on how to answer these questions and the mindsets that are necessary. But you're going to want to ask this. And by the way, as you're sitting down and thinking about what you want to achieve, don't stop where I've put them. Think about the other things that you want to achieve, because in the professional context, we're talking about a career here. Right? This is our career. It's in real estate. And in addition to setting number goals, we have career. Well, we should probably, if we want to be around for a long time, we need to have career goals as well.
I certainly hope so.
Right? Whether it be, I want to become a listing expert, whether it be, I want to be able to have a certain percentage market share,
or I want to build my business and sell it.
Right? That's a long-term goal, right? Perhaps it's you want to serve a new market. I was talking to one of our clients not too long ago, Ted Williams, and he's wrapping up his the CIP, the Certified International.
That certification.
The certification on the international thing. It's something that he wanted to do because it's related to a long-term goal of him being able to do retire, but still kind of do business in another country.
Sure.
Right. So, but think about
Dominican Republic or something.
Baja. He wants to do him in Cabo San Lucas.
Oh, that poor guy.
Dad, if you're on there, sorry. We had to use that as an example.
But we will come see you.
Yes, definitely. Please, if you got a good spot for us. We might have to have a paperless retreat there or something at Ted's house.
Paperless retreat in Cabo.
So I threw a few more things in here for you guys to consider, just to get your mind thinking, like, what goals do you have in terms of building up your reputation online? We talk about this extensively, so I don't want to belabor this point, but know that the majority of the business comes based on our reputation, right? According to the National Association of Realtors, when it comes to how people choose how they're going to work with, reputation is what it comes down to.
Yep.
And so if that's how buyers and sellers are making that determination, if we're not thinking about how we appear online or what our reputation is online, then it's left to the organic results of whatever happens, right? And versus just setting a little bit of intention. So I threw that goal in here. And then, of course, ask yourself, what am I going to need to learn to develop myself professionally?
Yep.
Oh, I also threw in here time to take off and how many hours a week you want to work. And
this is really important, but you have to be realistic. You can't sit there and say, I only want to work 5 days a week, but I want to make $1 million a year in real estate.
At this point, what you're doing is you're setting this stuff down because as we substantiate, we're going to start to get a better picture of what's required. A lot of times we set goals without really understanding what we're committing ourselves to or attempting to commit ourselves to. And this is something, Gary, that you've shown me. One of the things I've learned in working with you is the process of substantiation and how like I always like, oh yeah, you do this and you do that, and I got a plan, versus really substantiating, here's who I am, here's where I want to go. And your level of substantiation goes very deep to the point where you're like, okay, I know how many appointments I need to generate. I know the marketing. You can quickly go back and say, yeah, that's more than 20 hours a week for me, or whatever the case may be. So we're going to get to that. Day 4, after we've set our intention.
This is your big why.
This one is really important. We have to ask ourselves, for each one of the goals that we have, why do we want to achieve this goal?
Yeah, because that actually starts to give it meaning. Because if you just say, gosh, I want to make $150,000 in real estate next year, it's like, that's great. But until you can attach a why to that number, then there's really no drive, there's no pull, there's no push to actually make it happen.
Well, and a lot of times, let me say this. I'll give you an example. Back in the day, I used to have a goal that I set pretty consistently. All right, this is like I'm 43 now. So maybe like 10 to 15 years ago.
Okay.
One of the goals that I used to set was to have 6-pack abs, right? Like for a few years there, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna set a goal to have 6-pack abs. As it turns out, the result was more of a keg pack abs.
Yeah.
So no 6-pack. I never achieved.
But why did you want a 6-pack ab?
Because I don't think when you ask why I wanted it, it's like, I don't know, it would be cool. I don't know, so-and-so has abs, I should have abs.
But there was no deep, meaningful relevance there that you could attach to it, which is why you never did it.
Now, here's the thing. If I were, let's say I was a physical trainer or something like that, and I set a goal to have 6-pack abs, and you ask me why, and so I can be an inspiration to my clients.
That's a difference.
That person has a why. Yeah. Me, I'm like, do I want the 6-pack abs or do I want to take a sip from that keg? Well, the keg would win every time. You know what I mean?
Keg would win.
No, the funny
keg for the win.
The funny thing is, during that same time period, I set a different type of goal.
Okay.
That was still health related. Instead of setting a goal around 6-pack abs, I also had a goal of running a marathon, right? And the funny thing is, I didn't get the abs, but I ran the marathon.
What was your why with the marathon?
So what drove me to run the marathon was my wife was really getting into running and distance running. And it was something that I was either going to do with her or I wouldn't see her for, 4 or 5 hours over the weekend.
That's a big why right there. That's a big why.
And it was something that we could do together. And so that one had the why. And perhaps if my wife said, Chris, you really need to have 6-pack abs or I'm going to leave you, maybe that would have been.
You'd be ripped right now.
I'd be ripped right now, But, fortunately for me, she never said that. So instead, she was like, you better run or I'm going to run away. So anyway, really getting into the why for each one of these things is important. This one almost goes like existential to a degree.
It is. It's actually a spiritual process that you need to go through with your goal setting process is you need to add the why. Like, why is this important to me and why? Because if you can't add a meaningful why to it, you need to strip that goal out or change it.
Because going back to your point about why I want to sell $150,000 in real estate. Well, why? And you're like, well, everyone, this person over here is doing it and I just want to. But if your need is only, I need to sell 80,000, well, guess what?
You're going to sell
You're
80,000.
probably only going to sell 80,000 because that's all you need as opposed to what you wanted. Now, that doesn't mean you can't set these goals that are higher and more. That's going to rely heavily on the substantiation process that we're going to get into next, but really attempting to connect a certain why to. Now, you might say, I want to sell $150,000. I only need 80, but I'm going to give, like 40% of everything above that to a certain charity. Now, all of a sudden, you might have a strong enough why.
You have a good
particularly
why.
if you went to those people and committed to it,
That's
right?
true.
Because now you're adding this level of accountability when we're going to get to accountability. And that's why how we talk about manufacturing some consequences. But asking ourselves and really reflecting on, why do I want to achieve this? You should go multiple layers deep. If someone says, I want to sell $150,000, I want to get 150,000 GCI, why? And you'll probably have to go ask that question multiple times until you get to like the root motivation. Another thing you want to do is ask yourself, when I get to that root motivation, is there a cheaper, less time version that solves that problem? Because if there is, you will end up finding it.
You will find it, and you will take that. It's called the path of least resistance. So you will find it just like water does, and you will go that path.
And it's important to identify that, before you get yourself working up on a. Let me move on. Day 5.
Day 5. What is your gap
between the goals, right? And this is a concept.
By the way, if you're a brand new agent, you're not going to have a gap because there was no production last year.
Well, your gap is 0 to the benchmark that we said we wanted to establish.
Fair enough.
Right?
Fair enough.
So you still have a gap. It's what I'm going to do versus what I intend to do. This is a concept borrowed from performance consulting, right, or management consulting. But performance consulting is the field of study that this is borrowed from. And what you're looking at is the current state. Right. So you're going to plug in here your last year's performance, but you're not just looking at last year's performance. You're trying to assess current state, current capability, current ability to do what I want to do. That's why you want to line up. Here's what I did last year. Here's what I want to do in 2019 or in the next 12 months, because there's a gap between those things. And if you don't address the gap and you just try harder, guess what? You're going to do just like you did last year.
Exactly what you did last year.
So in looking, you have to put these numbers up side by side and ask the question, how am I going to achieve this? What am I going to do? What was involved with last year's performance, and what would it take to produce what I really want to do? Now, if you're brand new, the good thing is, well,
you got a 0 benchmark.
Yeah,
you got nowhere but up to go.
Nowhere but up to go. But for those of you who've been around for a while, and anyone who set a goal without this substantiation, know that you probably set a goal and you thought you had a plan. The problem is the plan didn't address the gap.
Right.
Right. It's very easy to say, oh, I want to sell more homes. Oh, I think I'm going to start a farming strategy. Oh, I'm going to go do expireds. Oh, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do this. Well, without understanding whether it just is like an add-on activity that takes away from us even achieving what we were going to achieve last year, it must address the gap. Okay, moving on. So you're going to ask those questions because your goal is to develop a plan. That's what we get into in day 6. And this is looking at that gap between where I am and where I want to be and having a plan for it. Now, in this document, you are not going to come up with the whole plan.
You're not going to come up with the whole plan. That would be, and in fact, one thing we were talking about a couple of days ago is that in the years where I have come up with my entire 12-month strategy and had a plan lined out, it never went according to plan. And so I stopped doing the entire year because it's ridiculous.
Think out the first quarter, maybe 2, right? But like you want to have a plan. And you want to just put the bullet points down. I want you to come back to day 6 after this process, and you'll dive into this more deeply.
Right.
But just start to set an intention on, how am I going to address these gaps between current level and desired level? Okay. Now, moving on to day 7, this is one of the biggest causes of breakdowns when it comes to goals, is that conflicts break our commitments, right? So
yes. Yeah.
This is what I refer to as life getting in the way. It's also priority conflict. So what you want to do is you want to think about each goal. Now you want to look back at the past, look at the setbacks that happened last year, and you want to say, where might there be a conflict? Because a lot of this comes down to time spent on task.
Yeah. Look, if you have 6 children and you're responsible for taking them to school, taking them lunch, bringing them home, taking them to soccer, and doing homework with them, how many hours a day does that actually leave for you to work? That is a potential conflict for you achieving your goals.
No, it's absolutely a conflict. Now, here's the other thing. You can't just say, and I made this mistake before, it was a hard lesson learned. There have been times in my career, times in my family life, where I did put the work over the family, like for extended period, like for years, I've done that. And it's one of the things that I regret now, but it was always a conflict when it was happening, right? It was a conflict when it was happening. Now, hopefully I'm a little bit wiser. Hopefully I'm a little bit smarter. Hopefully I've learned from those lessons. It's still a thing I have to address, but at least I know that when push comes to shove, I am going to end up choosing this over that. It's important for you to recognize these conflicts because you need to have a plan to address them. And it's something that I'm mindful of. And when we get into the planning process, which is later on, we're going to go through a thing called a time study as well as a daily planning process. But it is very important as you identify conflicts to be able to start organizing better. You know, so much of these conflicts can be addressed if we organize our time better. If we have a plan to address these things better. If we have a plan of understanding our energy levels throughout the day on what time should I do certain types of things, we can address these conflicts. Now, if you get sick with a kidney infection and you're laid out for a month,
there's very little you can do to overcome that.
Not much you can do. But fortunately, you know, I've got a great business partner. I've got a great team. So everything kept going without it being a problem. So that was like my fallback plan. However, most of the conflicts are from little things. It's from this little appointment came up, or, oh, you know, so-and-so's sick and I have to stay home today. Those are the types of conflicts that we need to have a backup plan for. Maybe it's looking for some childcare. Maybe it's looking for, you know, maybe you're taking care of your parents as well, right? And so you got to take care of your parents. Maybe it's getting some help some of the times just to make sure that you're addressing that conflict. If you look back at your setbacks, identify what the conflict, if it was as a result of some priority conflict that took place in your life, note that, come back to that and start thinking about what's the plan to handle this should it happen again.
Yeah. Then day 8, this is where once you've started working through all of your goals, it's a great time to actually reflect and say, are you willing to make a public commitment to other people that you are willing to do this? This is one thing that Chris and I were talking about on Facebook Live with Jarrett, our videographer. Jarrett made a commitment to lose 45 pounds a few years ago. And he made a commitment to his wife, and he told us. And so that was a public commitment, and we held him accountable. We're like, how you doing on that, Jarrett? How you doing on that?
He looks great, by the way.
He did it. He lost 45 pounds. Why? Not just because it was important to him. There were consequences if he didn't do it. He set the goal. He set the time. He was able to resolve his conflicts to do it. But when he made that public commitment, it made it real.
Yeah, it's funny. If it's only in our mind and it's only like on a piece of paper and it doesn't leave our head, it's okay if we don't achieve it. Like, there's no shame involved, right?
That's
like,
exactly right.
Consider this, you know, look at it as a structure of accountability. No, you're shaming yourself if you don't fulfill it. And that's okay if it gets us to do what we want to do. But there's more to it than just the shaming aspect of it. And it's being part of a community moving in the same direction is very powerful.
Gosh, Chris, where could everybody find a community to have a public commitment?
My goodness, we have this Facebook private group that they can put to use.
Yay!
So here's what you're going to do on day 8, which is you're going to go to the private Facebook group and you're going to share what your goals are, what your intentions are. You're going to interact with everybody as well. To be able to get some more ideas. You might see somebody else's goals and get some good ideas, encourage each other, maybe find a goal-setting buddy to partner up with to check in over the course of the year. So here's what's going to happen is simply by saying to a group of people like, hey, I'm going to do this. You know, what you're doing to yourself psychologically is you're making that public commitment. You're also being able to engage a community of people going in the same direction, because that creates a feeling of support. You can go even a step deeper by finding an accountability partner here. Now, you can. Now, some of you might have like a coach that does this for you. If you don't want to have a coach, find a peer who can you can check in with from time to time. It's amazing. I have this in different aspects of my life. I think together we have that with each other in our business. I have that in other areas of my life as well. So that, with my spouse, for my family, it's with my spouse. For my
men's group,
my men's group for spiritual development. Like I have all of these things. And here's what happened. We all get off track. The groups and the accountability partners that I have, they just make the time from the time I get off track to the time I get on track a little bit shorter, right?
I think what we're doing here is we're acknowledging the fact that we are social beings and we need that social interaction and accountability in order to achieve our goals.
So day 9 is to set what you're going to measure, what you're going to track, right? I think I forget who said it. Maybe it was Tony Robbins. I forget. Something about you grow.
Tony Robbins yelled something one day from stage, and it made this huge impact on a lot of people, but nobody can remember what he said.
There's something about measuring and growing stuff. But here's the thing. If you want to set some sort of regular check-in to see your progress, even if your progress is 0, you do want to see it. Now, more times than not, if you do have certain measurements that you're tracking in terms of being able to say, I'm going to accomplish these goals, you will reinvigorate yourself to keep coming back at it. The funny thing is, there's probably some areas of life where you may already be doing this. Maybe it's in your finances, maybe it's in your health, maybe it's in some other dimension where, you do keep some form of record and you're able to see progress in it. Well, being able to see that progress is a huge motivator to build up more progress, right? Because we get to experience a sense of accomplishment, even when we move that needle just a little bit. It's like when I say, I'm going to lose some weight. I like to be, my ideal weight for me is to be around 178. I have a tendency to jump up to 185. When I go from 185 to 183, I'm like strutting around the house. Like, check me out. I am fleeky today, right? Because that little bit of progress.
Joel says, what gets measured gets better.
That's
yes. Right, Joel.
Thank you. All right, so you want to set and write these things down. That's why we want to write them down so we can come back to it. Now, day 10 is a little bit departure.
I love this. So many people hate it.
I know, but if you know what, I'm gonna go get a copy example real quick.
So what he's talking about is we're going to help you measure your time and understand what you're doing with your time in 30-minute increments every single day.
Yep.
And so what's really important here is to be able to understand what we're doing, because have you ever gotten to the end of the day and said, oh my gosh, today just flew by and I don't even know what I did? That is not uncommon. And if we can't sit there and understand what we did during the day, how are we supposed to improve on it? And how are we supposed to measure the results from it?
Yeah, so I have a sample time study in that document. I'm actually doing this in writing. I know you're going to be like, well, I thought you were paperless. Well, Gary got me this cool journal, so I'm doing it.
Paperless, not paper-free.
So in half-hour increments, I just write down exactly what I was doing during that time. And here's the amazing thing about this. One is you're going to be able to go back and ask yourself, how much time did I spend on task? How much time did I spend working on achieving my goals?
Yeah.
There's another dynamic to this as well. As you're going through the day, because you're doing it real time, is you will increase your own productivity for the day. There's going to be a little bit of pressure to say, gosh, I just was on YouTube for 20 minutes. I need to make up that 20 minutes somewhere else because I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
And so you will see there's a tremendous, I encourage you to do it for at least 3 days. If you can do it for even more extended periods of time, you're going to find that you have continued levels of increased productivity. This is something that was, I learned about this from Peter Drucker, right? Father of management sciences. In one of his books, The Effective Executive, he talks about the need for people to be able to understand where time is going. Mm-hmm. Because when we set objectives and don't apply our time to the objective doesn't happen.
Yeah. My dad used to say, I don't know where we're going, but we're making damn good time. But the point is that if you don't know where you're going and what the ultimate outcome is, what are you doing with your time?
Well, and another thing that Drucker said, and I find this fascinating because you said the same thing, but unbeknownst to you, I believe, is that you've got to spend, if there's an important objective, you got to spend about 2 hours a day working on it. Like if it's a business objective that you have, 2 hours, if it's really important to you, about 2 hours a day should go into it. And I've heard you say that about prospecting.
Prospecting,
that
2 hours a
every
day.
day someone should be spending about 2 hours a day on prospecting. So if you know these things where you have these objectives and you're not measuring your time to be able to apply the time to it, it simply doesn't happen. The time study is a great way to find out where exactly is all that going. Am I watching a little bit too much Netflix in the evenings? Am I taking a little bit too much time getting ready in the morning with my coffee? Am I taking that YouTube break in the afternoon? Is it running more into 45 minutes instead of the 10 minutes that I originally planned? I mean, all of these things get addressed with a time study.
Yeah.
Moving on. So there's an example of the time study in there for you guys. Day 11 is what are you going to do this week? This is building out a calendar and maintaining a weekly calendar.
This is what I like to call time blocking.
Yep.
So that's where I like to time block during the week. So, in the prime of my career, I was going on 6 listing appointments a week. Well, what I had to do for my assistant is I had to time block on my calendar the times that I was available for them to schedule those appointments. And so I was blocking that. The very first thing, I highly recommend that you time block in every week, month, and year is time with the family or time with yourself and vacation time, because you've got to set that. Otherwise, it'll just get blown out and then you won't remember it. You won't have it. Then you start time boxing for other things. Time block for prospecting. You've got to set up that time to be able to make sure it's in your calendar and set reminders for it too.
Now, what I suggest is asking yourself how much time you're going to invest in each week that will allow you to do that time blocking more effective. And you'll see you're going to build the week, but you're going to adjust daily. And so every day you should be looking at your calendar and looking out over the next several days and making the necessary adjustments. Perhaps you time blocked to get your marketing out for 2 hours on Wednesday and you got it done in 90 minutes. Well, you want to account for that and say, well, maybe next time I only need to time block for 90 minutes, right? Or let's say you had time blocked 2 days to do that marketing. Well, you just opened up that second day to do something else. And so you're going to ask yourself, how much time do you need? Have you scheduled enough time? And you're going to validate that through an ongoing time study for yourself. Now, day 12, slightly different path. After we're going through this planning process, now we want to talk a little bit about habits. So much of our, so many of our setbacks are from ourselves, right? And if we can develop a better set of habits, particularly in real estate, it's, in real estate, most of us don't identify as doing sales activities or being sales people.
Right.
But being in real estate requires us to have good sales practices if we want to take good care of our customers. And so whether it's sales practices, whether it's marketing practices, you want to think about, in order to achieve my goals, what are the habits that I need to have? Perhaps the habit you need is a regular calendaring and planning process just to get the things done. Whatever that habit is, use Ben Franklin's method, right? Good old Ben Franklin developed the process for habit development, which is choose one, just choose one, practice it every day.
Until you don't think about it.
Until you don't think about it. And then move on to the next one.
And I think the biggest challenge that we all have is, especially after New Year's and New Year's resolutions, is that we want all these brand new habits. And so we throw them all in there and then we can't keep any of them. So we're like, well, screw it. I'll just try it next year.
Eventually a habit becomes unconscious and therefore it's no longer a thing you think about. It's just something you do. It's just the hard part is when you're thinking about it, right? Yep. And then once you're doing it, it's no longer work and you can move on to the next one. Day 13 is about maintaining your motivation. I'm going to share with you a slightly different take on motivation because, there's a lot of ways to get inspiration. There's a lot of ways to get motivation. I try to look for ways that are self-created, meaning I'm not relying on external sources of motivation
because it's not reliable.
It's not, because if it's an external one, that means I oftentimes have to go to it, right? Like even if I hire a coach, for example, I can easily stop answering their calls. You know what I mean? It's just but if you can find internal motivation, and this comes from the field of education, where there's a bit of a phenomenon. which is this. If you learn something new, it will motivate you to do that thing and to learn something else. So it is but it makes so much sense. How many times, Gary, have you learned a new tool or technology or marketing app and all of a sudden got reinvigorated to sell real estate?
It just excites me over and over again. I remember talking to this one gentleman who was 82 years old. He had been retired for a long time. And then he found our iPad for real estate training. And he's like, this makes real estate fun again. And so, yeah, by learning something new, it sparks all these new, really kind of synapses and connections in my brain where I'm like, oh, I want to keep doing this.
Well, and that's why it is a powerful motivator. And people oftentimes overlook learning as a motivator. But if you learn something new, when you learn that new thing, you will be inspired to do that new thing. And when you do that new thing, it validates you to go learn something else. And that's what keeps us excited about real estate. It's one of the reasons why I love what I get to do, right? So for me, I love learning new things. I actually also love sharing what I have learned as well, which is why I like to share what I've learned with you guys. But every time I get in, marketing has like this open field of things that I can learn, like an indefinite thing of things that I can learn, that I can go apply in our real estate practice, go figure out how these things work. And that's what keeps me motivated. I find that many of my dry seasons, so to speak, are when I've just gotten lazy and stopped learning stuff. So one of the things I've recognized for myself is I need to have, like, if not daily, make sure a couple of times a week, I'm actively pursuing and learning something new to keep me motivated in my business. So that's day 13. Think about how you want to develop, what you're going to develop. Come up with a little bit of a plan, right? Set some learning goals for yourself, and then give yourself a bit of a plan and a deadline to achieve them. And then we get to day 14, guys, which is getting to work. You don't want to go through this process and then wait till January 1st. Okay?
No, you actually have to start taking action.
Right.
But just like, what about Bob? It's about baby steps, because you don't just jump in and start doing everything all at once. That's why Chris has right here, write down the 5 steps you're going to take in the next 24 hours. If you complete this process, maybe it takes you 20 days to complete it. Maybe you get it done in 5. I don't know. I just listed that as 14 days because it's a lot of work. But at the conclusion of that time, you would be cheating yourself if you did not start to put it into action. Now, my hope is that you will get through and start doing something new. But I want to make sure that you've got specific set of things that you can do, that you can take action on in the 24 hours after you complete this process, to start putting that stuff to work, right? Maybe it's pursuing the learning goals. Perhaps it's getting, just hopping into that calendar and starting to do that process and scheduling your prospect time. Whatever it is, figure out, just write down 5 simple things where you can take action in the next 24 hours after completing this, not right now, to start working on your goals. And with that is our 14-day goal setting challenge. And that's the workbook that we have for you. I'm going to be sending out some additional communications more than I normally would, just to check in with everybody on this. This is a resource that we want everybody to be able to use. Now, even if you're doing this through, let's say, another process, pick and choose what's going to work for you out of this and put them to work for you. Awesome. So we've got a few questions to answer real quick, Chris. Betty says, what was the offer for with Jim Pruitt? I had connectivity issues coming in. I just turned the screen off. Would you pull that up? And so Jim Pruitt is a club member here at Paperless Agent, and he has a Paperless Agent quick start consultation. He's charging $265. By the way, this was approved by us for him to offer to you if you're a new member, or if you need help really launching things and getting things set up with your Paperless Agent Club and all of the resources you have here. You can ask him to help you set that up. It's $265, and his email is jimpruitt@gmail.com. And it's 2 T's or 3 T's?
3 T's.
Jim Pruitt, Tampa. So there is his email address, Betty. I just put that in there for you. So if you need that, you got it. Clifton said, how do you access the private Facebook group? I'm going to ask Sarah to get you access to that. And the
Oh,
link
it's
to
just
that.
click on that link. I'll drop the link. I popped the link in here. Just go to
okay.
here.
Chris is going to get that. Who asked that question? That was Clifton. Clifton, if you and or anybody else needs that link to the private Facebook group, Chris is going to drop that into the chat section under my name. There you go. And then Jody says, Chris, you mentioned as a new realtor, if you have some financial backing, what do you suggest investing in? Top 1, 2, 3.
Oh my goodness.
Because you briefly, like for a split second, mentioned unless you don't, if you don't have financial backing, this is just do this.
Well, actually, Gary, I would kick that question back over to you because, I mean, I have a few ideas, but I am curious what you would suggest for it. I mean, because you've coached more real estate professionals than I have.
I love Jerry's answer.
What did he say?
Jerry said, invest in Leap.
Well, thank you. Yes, Jerry, we
so
do.
Actually, yeah. So
I think
here's my answer.
I have an answer.
Is that,
I got it.
But you asked me that.
I know. You go first. You go first, so
right.
That way I can say mine and it'll be better. Just kidding.
So here's my answer: is that I spent the first probably 18 months of my career as really working with buyers because they're much easier to secure. It takes a lot less specific knowledge in order to be able to work with and consult buyers than with sellers. And I was working with another agent, like they had excess leads, and I would take them and pay them a referral fee. So I was just working with buyers. Man, I got burned out quickly. And so what I did is I very quickly shifted my education from processing buyers quickly to learning how to become a listing expert. And if I could let anybody know, if you want a long-term career in real estate without burning out as much as I did and without having to spend as much time with clients as most people do, become a listing expert. If you become a listing expert, it allows you to leverage your time across a great number of clients versus just sitting in a car spending as much time. Because here's the unfortunate fact of working with buyers is it takes a lot more time to service buyers because you are in a car driving miles or kilometers. And so that's the big difference. And so if you can leverage it and become a listing expert, that to me would have been the number one thing I would have done early in my career.
If I had the dough, so this is answering the question. It's funny because mine's similar but a little bit different. So I was going to say I would put that money into a neighborhood. I don't want to use the word geographic farming because people usually associate geographic farming.
Well, we do farming, but it's not geographic.
Right. Well, it is
kind of, but
for Westlake it is. But for the other stuff, it's price point.
It's price point. Right. It's demographic marketing.
But I'm gonna just take the typical person. What I say is. The reason why I hesitate to use geo-farming is because usually people associate that with a postcard strategy.
Right. I see.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So, but I would pick a neighborhood, and then I would apply all my marketing dollars into a highly concentrated neighborhood. Because what's going to happen is you will, over time, if you spend time and invest, not just your dollars, but also your time, your physical presence in that neighborhood, you're going to eventually become that listing expert unless someone has massive market share in there, like they've got 40 or 50% market share, then that's going to be hard for you to break. But in terms of how I would spend those dollars then is I would use digital marketing in terms of being able to use tools like Facebook ads, Google ads in that area. I would also, if I had the money and looking at that and we don't do this right now, and a part of it is because we turn away a lot of business. But if I was not turning away so much business, I would consider using a home search site just in that neighborhood to get started building market share. And then I would also do a postcard strategy. So I would throw all that money in a highly concentrated area, building myself up, as Gary was talking about, as that listing expert for that neighborhood. And so that's including all those things. So you probably end up spending, the leads, the home search site probably costs you about $1,000. You could probably do the digital marketing also on your own in addition to that for another $1,000 a month. And then to do the postcard strategy, depending on the size, let's say 500 to, let's say another. So
You're
if you had
probably
$3
looking at
grand,
$3 grand a
if you had good backing, you'd be looking at about $3 grand a month. That's where I'd apply it into a very specific neighborhood.
And one thing I do want to educate you on, even if you hit it hard and you are consistent with your omnipresent marketing in a region like
time.
that, you're looking
time.
at 9 to 12 months before you get your first listing. So that's one of those things, is that you can't give up, but you also have to make sure it's the right geographic region.
Now, you can, I believe you can shorten the time frame if what you do is start, if like I said, having a physical presence, if you're willing to go in there and start knocking on doors, shaking hands, meeting babies, whatever.
It's kissing babies and shaking hands.
If you're willing to be the mayor of that community, essentially.
Shaking babies and kissing hands.
Yeah, don't do that. Then you will probably be able to shorten that time frame.
Right.
Because like a great example, I think it was Chip Barkell was telling me, like, where he had he told a story about where he was walking. He was doing his postcard strategy, and then he ended up walking down the street and like picked up 2 opportunities just by walking down the street and introducing himself to people. So like, if you're willing to go that extra step, you could probably close that time frame, which I would highly encourage you to do.
Yep. But first step is you got to do this annual planning. You've got to get this planning in place, and then what will come out of it are kind of tertiary plans saying, okay, now I'm going to go execute on this in order to fulfill on that financial goal. All right, everybody. So
any other questions?
Those are the best questions we've got so far.
Angela was asking, what is a home search site? That's those paid lead services.
Paid lead service like Realtor.com, Zillow.com, Homes.com.
But, ma'am, if you're going to go that route, there's no simple question, no simple answer for that. Each one of the things I just told you, you can only do one at a time. You can only implement one at a time if you're going to use the money, because each one of those requires an implementation period and a learning curve to be able to understand how to use them that exceeds being able to like say, oh, I'm just going to drop $3,000 a month on these marketing things and good things will happen. Learning how to use Facebook and Google, that's a learning curve. Learning how to process online leads from a home search site, process meaning work on the process of conversion to turn them into clients, also a pretty significant learning curve. Postcard strategy, less so, because that's easy to do. But the other ones, there's a bit of a learning curve.
I have several questions about the December MVP file.
Chris, I slapped you a link to that.
Oh, stand by.
I got it right here.
Stand by. And then, and Tracy said, maybe I missed it. Do we have sessions every day, or are we working the program on our own? Tracy, you are working the program on your own.
But we'll be checking in with email and on the private Facebook group. So please pay attention to your inbox, as well as check in with the private Facebook group frequently, as we're going to make this a part of our conversation throughout this month.
And then last question for the session. Diane said, do you know anything about Remine? I don't, but I assume it's probably a data collector that helps you determine geographic farms, et cetera. So I'll look into that. But thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Cool.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Chris, this was fun.
Yeah, it was. You know what? It's always exciting for me when we get to share something a little bit different from just getting into the tactics of technology and real estate and marketing, because so much of what we do that's only a part of what we do in our real estate practice. There's a lot of other stuff that goes on, but we end up sharing a snippet of that because that's usually what people want. But this is the one time of year we can get away with talking about something a little bit different without getting into too much trouble with you guys. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you've enjoyed this session where we're sharing this workbook. What I really hope is that you'll be able to go through that 14-day goal setting challenge, work through that workbook, and begin to experience the benefit of effective planning. Effective means not doing it well so much as doing the right thing to begin with, right? So going back to Peter Drucker, one of the things he talked about is that it is truly a waste of time to do something efficient that didn't need to be done in the first place, all right? So, I mean, like, I can't tell you how many times that has happened to me where, I was working on the perfect Vine post, and lo and behold, Vine's not around anymore, right? So what he talked about is the necessity for us to do which is effective, means it's the right thing to first place. You could do the right thing and you could do it poorly and have a better result than doing the wrong thing really well.
That's exactly right.
Right. And so that's what this whole process is designed to do, is to help you do the right thing. So this time next year, when we're getting together, you're going to look at it and say, you know what, I had a pretty good year. And that's what we want you to have in the coming year, is a pretty darn good year.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.